Moroaica are among the creepiest and most unfortunate enemies that Ethan Winters will encounter during the events of the game Resident Evil 8 Village. Mostly former servants and staff of the Dimitrescu castle, many of these lost souls were once just typical women living normal lives in the isolated Eastern European region. That is, until they met the lord of the land, Alcina Dimitrescu, and were taken into the castle's dungeons to be drained of their blood and serve as sacrifices of sustenance for Lady Dimitrescu and her daughters. The story of the Moroaica as we know it begins with Lady Dimitrescu herself and her arrival in this lonely, isolated village. While we don't have all the details about Alcina Dimitrescu's life before her relocation to Eastern Europe, we do know that once she arrived, she was promptly taken by the religious ruler of the land, Mother Miranda, to be used as a test subject for her experiments with what she called a cadeau. Except, unlike most subjects that underwent this testing, Alcina was remarkably receptive to the introduction of Miranda's gift. Alcina showed an incredible affinity to bond with Miranda's cadeau, and with its implementation into her body, she would gain several incredible abilities which would make her essentially immortal. But with these abilities also came side effects. Due to a rare genetic blood disease, the cadeau would manifest in Alcina a need to ingest human flesh and blood in order to maintain these regenerative capabilities and keep her body from becoming unstable and mutating. These defects made Lady Dimitrescu an unsuitable candidate for the needs of Mother Miranda, but her newly developed strength and ability were too valuable an asset to simply disregard, and so Miranda would place the then 44-year-old into her council, making her a lord of the region and granting her a castle with which to carry out her illicit affairs, away from the prying eyes of the villagers. And it would be in this castle that the unfortunate tale of the Moroaica would begin. With Alcina's new position came prestige in the region, and with the endorsement of the village's saint, Mother Miranda, Alcina would recruit women to come work for her and help with the upkeep of the massive castle estate. To sustain Alcina's need for human flesh and blood, sacrifices would be secretly brought to the castle and taken into the dungeons, bled through torturous means to provide the fuel that Lady Dimitrescu required. A problem which would only get worse as an experiment conducted with cadavers, cadeau eggs, and flies would create 3 new bloodthirsty mouths to feed. However, while much of the Dimitrescu blood supply seemed to come from these sacrifices, the Moroaica were largely birthed from the staff at the castle. Alcina and her daughters would become infamous amongst the maids as brutal tyrants, quick to anger at any who failed, even slightly in their duties. Recounts of the maids telling of violent outbursts from the Dimitrescu daughters, and horror stories of frightening wails coming from the castle's cellar. What happened behind the closed doors of the castle's cellar was something of an open secret amongst the staff, and they lived in constant fear that any slip-up would put them on the Dimitrescu's menu. Like the village sacrifices, the maids who'd crossed Alcina and her daughters would be taken into the dungeons to be tortured and bled by devilish archaic devices, their bodies left bloodless dried husks to feed the castle lords. However, this torture would only be the beginning of their misfortunes. Once a body was sufficiently drained of its fluids, Alcina would inject the corpse with mold in an attempt to revive a shell of the woman they used to be. The lucky ones failed to reanimate after the injection, but many would be reborn as what would come to be known as Moroaica. These unfortunate souls would have serious mental degradation, their lives revolving around violence, hunger, and perhaps even thirst, seeking the blood of others to refill their empty bodies. Throughout the years, dozens, if not hundreds of women would be turned into these sauntering abominations, kept locked under the castle as boogeymen to scare the surviving staff of the estate. Moroaica are some of the most tragic creatures that Ethan will encounter during his time in this Eastern European region, living lives of fear before being tortured and drip-dried of every last drop of blood in their bodies, revived only to be encaged and starve underneath the castle. Alcina Dimitrescu was a truly wicked and vile woman, and none knew that better than the women who would become the Moroaica.